and kill them with camels and others, and a lot of people, especially there, one of the factors that I saw, lots of families with kids were out there. So obviously people were scared and they went home, and the news went around and crews start pulling out and saying this revolution is over, it's dead, it's finished, it's not going anywhere. But as soon as that word came out, and one of the victims was this young woman, her poster went up, and the number of people just showing up impromptu filled up the square, and that was totally unexpected because the government thought once we push, they're gone, and the foreign media as well fell into that idea that they're finished. So I think women did play, and I took tons of pictures of what you were referring to. A lot of women in sort of mixed dress, mixed generations, mixed ages, mixed backgrounds. And they were out there, and I think they were very aware of the fact that, yes, they want democracy, they want to get rid of Mubarak, but everybody I spoke to, they will be saying, you know what, getting rid of Mubarak is one step, but we are demanding all these other things. The fact that they're demanding for all changes, the fact they didn't want a military government to be in place, is all an indication that, you know, for the lack of better word, the old saying that the genie's out of the bottle, and it would be difficult for anyone to push it back. And I think maybe in my sense of optimism, I know there's a lot of hurdles and a lot of steps to be taken, but I don't believe that a lot of these women who consciously went out there and they hang posters in their, you know, nicks, and they walked miles and miles. It's not a very small area. You know, you'll be exhausted by the time you've done it a couple of times, but they will be going back and forth, marching all the time, and sometimes with kids and babies. I don't think that they're willing to kind of go and sit back now. You see, the other thing as well is because historically they look back at what happened in the Iranian Revolution. Iranian Revolution had women as its strongest constituency. They were out there, but immediately after the revolution, they were robbed of their rights and they're pushed. And so I think the Egyptian women are considering that, you know, the societies as well quite different now than what the time of the Iranian Revolution happened. But they're very conscious, and a lot of women I talk to, they'll be like, we want our rights, we want things to be different and to be improved situation for us. And employment, I think, has been on one of the top of their agendas, because a lot of women were saying that they like, you know, to have access to jobs. And again, the young generation, I think it's you know, it's quite incredible to see that force and that power. And that's why I kind of wonder about the effect of it in other parts of the Muslim world, because we have a completely different situation in Libya now. We have a situation in Algeria, in Yemen, in Bahrain, and it's reaching to Saudi Arabia, where women are not allowed to drive. So how much of this is going to transmit or transform how women view themselves in the other Muslim societies would be very interesting to watch.
That's one of the easy things to do, is to just sort of paint this as the whole Arab world, when in fact they are distinct countries, they are distinct cultures, you know, each one of them. So I'm curious, as far as when I've been traveling in the Middle East and in the Muslim world for quite a number of years now, and that something like domestic abuse, something like sexual abuse is very, very much kept under the radar screen. Have you seen it change over the years? Have you seen it change since what's happening in the Mideast right now? Has it become more open, something that they talk about?
You mean just in the past few weeks?
Actually, no, just over the years. You've been doing this for a long time. You know, and everything does evolve. I'm just wondering if it is, over the years, come out more in the open, that people actually talk about it now, and certainly in the past few weeks since we've seen this, because we were talking about women's roles changing there, and I just wanted to see if women here are coming to the fore, Muslim women as well.
Well, certainly in the Arab and Muslim communities here, there is a growing openness to address the issue of domestic violence, and there are many communities that are not only addressing it, but are, you know, setting up shelters or hotlines, or setting up partnerships with existing agencies and organizations to provide services to their communities. We have a pretty broad spectrum in terms of level of awareness and willingness to engage around the issues. So there are still Muslim communities, like other communities of faith in this country, that have yet to acknowledge that domestic violence exists within their faith community. And there are other communities that are just, you know, sort of at the cutting edge and developing really appropriate resources. So, you know, in the Middle East, probably Cindy could answer that question better in terms of what's happening overseas, but we do hear of organizations that are being founded, being established, hotlines, and, you know, few shelters here and there. It certainly is becoming a topic that is that people are just confronted with and have to deal with. So it's happening.
Just slow, baby steps.
Slow, just like it happened here. Slow.
Cindy, let me pick up on that, because you were talking quite rightly, it doesn't matter what's written in the Constitution, it's how it's implemented in that. I want to ask you, if you look out at the world right now, and it doesn't even have to be the Arab world by any means, where are you most disheartened as far as what we're talking about here today, and also where do you feel optimistic? What area of the world, where have you seen signs where something is moving?
Well, I think that I would almost take it country by country as opposed to region. I think that the most difficult piece is to get the NGO community, these communities who are providing shelter for victims of domestic and sexual violence, the people who are providing services for victims of human trafficking. What's most difficult is to get those NGO service providers working closely with the government, who is responsible for investigating and prosecuting cases of domestic sexual violence, human trafficking. You know, NGOs can go in and they can serve victims all day long. But nothing is but in order to stem the tide of victims, we've got to have effective criminal justice response to these crimes against women. That is what I think is the hardest thing to get. The places, there are some bright spots. I am working with a number of countries who are doing a great job at setting up what at Vital Voices we call the coordinated community response, the situation where the criminal justice professionals are working closely with the NGO service providers. And I'll tell you that when they work together, they make a formidable opponent. But when they are working in silos, neither one is able to stem the tide of victims. A place in the Arab world that's really a pretty good example of this is Jordan. They absolutely are taking on the issue of domestic violence. They haven't skirted around it. They're addressing domestic violence. They even have a specialized unit within their police department, so that when a victim of domestic violence reports the violence, she reports it to people who are specially trained in domestic violence. They even have a place where they're working closely enough with the NGOs and the criminal justice professionals that they have a single location where a victim can go to and access a medical professional and an NGO service provider and a specialized law enforcement officer, all in one location that has an on-site daycare, so that you can go with your kids with no appointment and see everybody that you need to see. They have several of these centers opening up in Amman already, and then they're working on opening them up in some of the outlying areas. So that's definitely a bright spot. Another place which has, I would point to in Asia, is probably India. India obviously has a terrible problem with human trafficking. You cannot think about the issue of sex trafficking, sexual slavery without pretty much quickly thinking about India. They too are making progress, and they're making it because they're starting to work together with the criminal justice system and the NGOs. We're working with a woman who's actually going to be in Washington, D.C. We're giving her one of our awards at Vital Voices is giving her the Human Rights Leader Award. Sunitha Krishnan, who is a 4'9" force of nature. She is amazing. She rescues by working very, very closely with the police department. Together they go and rescue women and children who are trapped in the brothels of Hyderabad in India. And she works closely with the police. She provides them information. As a result, whenever they find victims, who do they call? They call Sunitha. They have a really good relationship. And she not only has a shelter for them, but she realized that some of the women trapped in the brothels she's not going to be able to save. And so she said, you don't have to come see me, but send your kids to school with me. And so she takes their kids and gives them schooling so that they can avoid second-generation prostitution. And then those victims that do come, obviously they need a job, or where are they going to go? Right into the brothels, which have the green light on the door, you know. So what does she do? She says, I'm going to give you job placement. But she doesn't just say, oh, well, you're a victim of trafficking, so you can learn to sew. That's what you can do. You'll be a seamstress. You want to be a seamstress, don't you? Well, maybe she doesn't. And so if you go to see Sunitha, you can be a welder, a carpenter, a bookbinder, a taxi driver, or a seamstress, or she will, whatever you want to do, she wants to make that dream. And again, she's doing it, she's working closely with the criminal justice system. That is what will make a difference, not all of us working in silos.
You know, I cover war for a living, but, you know, I don't know if I could do your work because, you know, you're just talking about the real highlights and the bright lights of, you know, these success stories and that, but I still get the feeling that this is something that, you know, you've got a long, long way to go, though, right, with everything else that's still going on out there?
It is. I'm a crazy person. Yeah. And I have an 8-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. So, but I think that I wouldn't keep doing it. You know, I was a specialized prosecutor for 14 years, and people said, how can you do it? It's because I win. You know, and so I'm going to come back tomorrow. If we didn't see these bright spots, if we didn't see, I couldn't do it, but we are seeing it. And we even have a formula if you would just work together. It's just getting it done that is still troublesome.
Dina, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you a hard question here. In your country, I mean, in many ways, in Egypt, but in Egypt, in many ways, just soaring ahead with everything else, but in many ways, it's still so backwards. And I'm thinking about